I'm Carmilla. Welcome to Ticket Stubs. Are you ready to talk about some movies? Because I am. Let's get on with it. Woo! Imaginary is the new film from Blumhouse, the studio behind a couple of great movies like Get Out and Whiplash, and countless other pieces of bottom-of-the-barrel trash. The company has a low-risk model in which they invest in smaller budget horror films that are guaranteed to at least make a little bit of money, and that can be produced and put into theaters very quickly. Imaginary is already the second Blumhouse film to hit theaters this year after Night Swim, and honestly, I struggle to find a single redeeming quality in this absolutely horrendous film. It's directed by Jeff Wadlow, who also made Fantasy Island and Truth or Dare, also for Blumhouse, two movies that I thought looked so bad I didn't even bother seeing them. And for whatever reason, the trailer for this movie kind of amused me and made me think it could at least be a guilty pleasure or a cheesy so bad it's good movie, but I was sorely mistaken. I honestly don't know that I've ever seen a horror film that feels quite so cynical and uninspired. It's the scary movie about the little girl who's got an imaginary friend that's not imaginary and he's not your friend, and the mom also had an imaginary friend when she was a kid, but she doesn't remember that until halfway through the movie because otherwise the plot wouldn't work. And there's some jump scares and some creepy people with creepy eyes, and it's rated PG-13, so you don't have to be worried about anyone dying on screen or anything actually scary happening. It is one of the most lethargic and boring horror films I've ever sat through. Genuinely nothing happens for most of this movie. We follow recycled characters with recycled and one-note motivations, recycled scares. There is not an original idea in this film's head, if it even had one. The scares are laughably embarrassing. 3 separate times and framed in the exact same way, a character will go down into the basement with a hidden figure in the background. It's always done in the same framing with the same figure. It's not even in a different spot. It's really weird. The acting is atrocious across the board, with the exception of the main actress, who at least seems to be trying. The little girl is absolutely horrible, which is more of a reflection on how her character is written and directed than how she actually is. A child performance, I think, is often dependent on what the director is telling them to do, and in this case, she just feels like she's talking like an adult. It's never once believable. It's really an awful performance that I don't blame her for. There's a scene where she has a therapy session with her imaginary friend, which is a teddy bear named Chauncey, and the lines she's given in this scene and the way she delivers them would be far more appropriate in a scene depicting 2 spouses fighting. It's all just so thoroughly unbelievable. The only thing about this movie that actually is entertainingly bad is the performance by the next door neighbor, who's an old woman who is an expert on imaginary friends and remembers a traumatic event from the main character's past that she has forgotten about conveniently. And you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna spoil the trajectory of her character because it is pretty funny. Sorry if you care about spoilers for Imaginary, but I promise you it's so cliched you could probably figure this out. When she's first introduced, she's kind of assertive and weirdly threatening, and it felt like the film was trying so hard to telegraph that she was dangerous that I felt like she almost couldn't be the villain because it was that obvious. But no, she is the villain. It turns out she used to babysit the main character when she was little and watched her open a portal to the imaginary friend universe, and since then she's become an expert on imaginary friends and knows that they are spirits that form a bond with a child, and then if that bond is broken or something, then they turn hostile. And so when the little girl disappears into the same universe, she helps them open a portal, and then when they're on the other side, she closes their only means of escape and goes off on this weird villainous monologue about how everyone thought she was crazy for writing a book about how imaginary friends were real, but now she knows she's right, and she's not crazy, even though she wants to live in this universe forever now, and she is immediately attacked by something off screen and dies. And the best part is that when I looked up the actress, I found out that she also played the weird old lady in The Happening.
I hear you whispering. Planning on stealing something?
No, ma'am, we're not.
Plan on murdering me in my sleep?
What? No!
The film's design and visual style is also slapdash at best. There's a scene early on that's just a conversation between two characters, and it's shot in a very typical shot-reverse-shot format, and one of the characters has text on his shirt, and in one shot I noticed that the text was mirrored and unreadable, but then the next time it cut back to him, still framed in the exact same way, the text was not mirrored. I have no idea what was up with that. If there's one place where this film maybe deserves a little bit of credit, it's in the fantasy realm. Again, it's not original at all. It looks like it was designed by M.C. Escher, but I do like the aesthetic. I really liked the color palette, and it was nice to look at something visually interesting for the first time in this movie. I've already given this movie way more of my breath than it deserves, but there is one other thing I want to mention, and that's the runtime. This thing has the fucking stones to be 1 hour and 45 minutes, which, no, is not the longest runtime in the world, but for this type of movie that only exists to get teenagers to buy a ticket so they can make shitty jokes from the back of the theater, anything over 90 minutes feels like an insult, and especially when this film is so unoriginal and paced so goddamn slowly, it is just one of the most insufferable films I've sat through in a long time. So yep, that's Imaginary. I think I'm gonna be avoiding Blumhouse movies from now on. It doesn't seem that they have any interest in making good movies. It is a colossal waste of time. I wish I could get that hour and 45 minutes back. Don't see it, don't pay for it. It is not worth any of your time, even for just a little bit of funny shit here and there. No, 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 no. Don't watch it. It is awful. 1 out of 10. Dune Part 2 is finally here, the newest film from Denis Villeneuve and the follow-up to 2021's smash hit Dune. I did talk about that movie in this video, so if you're interested in hearing my thoughts, then do check it out. I stand by pretty much everything that I said there, although I have changed my rating since from an 8 out of 10 to a 6 out of 10. I think a 6 better reflects how I feel emotionally about the movie. I think it's a really well-made movie, but I'm not enthusiastic about it, and I think as a singular film, it's quite unsatisfying. But I thought Part 2 was a massive improvement in pretty much every sense. The pacing is better, the action is better, the characters are better, the acting is better, it's more interesting, there's a whole lot more going on philosophically and emotionally. Despite being like 20 minutes longer than Part 1, I found this just so much easier to get through. I rewatched Part 1 before seeing it and it took me 4 sittings, whereas I was never really bored watching Part 2. I sat patiently in the theater and honestly enjoyed pretty much all of its 3 hours. If there's one portion of the film that didn't quite capture me, it is the love story angle, and it's not that it's done particularly badly, and I think it's probably done the best it could be. It's just one of those instances where an adaptation has to include an unavoidable cliche. It's executed perfectly fine, it's just very familiar at this point. I thought Timothée Chalamet was considerably better in this one than the last film. He is given a whole lot more to work with here, and his performance gets better as the film goes along. There's a real transformation, and by the end he's genuinely intimidating. I also found Rebecca Ferguson a lot more interesting in this one. Her character transforms into something a lot darker and more mysterious here, and I found it quite engaging to watch. She's a very significant character in terms of the philosophical underpinnings of the film. The commentary on the evils that can result from religious zealotry and blind faith makes this a much more meaningful film to me than the first. And honestly, on the whole, the performances from the returning cast were significantly better than they were in Part 1. Javier Bardem in particular was awesome and very charismatic. Zendaya did a pretty good job for the most part, although I have to say there were some times where she came across more like a pouty child than anything, and I can't quite pin down whether I feel that was intentional or not, but something did feel just slightly off about her performance compared to the rest of the cast. I don't know the age of her character in the book, so maybe I'm just misinterpreting how old she's supposed to be in the film. In addition to the returning stars, there are several other big-name actors that are introduced in this second part, including Christopher Walken, who tries, Florence Pugh, who was quite good, and Austin Butler as the new villain, who honestly steals the show. He's genuinely terrifying and mysterious, and erotic in the weirdest way. Listen, the pussy wants what the pussy wants. Dave Bautista also gives a very entertaining performance that's incredibly over the top. I swear he yells every single line he has. Honestly, I have very little else to say about Dune Part 2. I just don't care about this story as much as the Die Hard fans do, and I really only wanted to see it because I like Denis Villeneuve more than actually wanting to see a Dune movie, if that makes sense. So if you want to hear someone talk about this movie in depth, I am not the one to do it, and I'm sure you can find a whole lot of that out there on YouTube. I just wanted to mention that I watched it, say what I liked about it, what I didn't, and yeah, overall I liked it a lot more than the first one. I thought it was an improvement. It moves along at a great pace, it's quite entertaining, the black sun planet was awesome and beautiful to look at. It is a really good sci-fi blockbuster, and that's about all I have to say about it. 8 out of 10. I also saw a nifty little horror film called Late Night with the Devil. This film presents itself as a television broadcast in the 70s. It's a Halloween variety show that we are told at the beginning ended in disaster. Basically, this is supposed to be a big comeback for a late night talk show host played by David Dastmalchian, who plans to end the show with an interview with the devil himself. Or rather, a teenage girl who is possessed by the devil. I thought this film had a terrific sense of escalation. At first, the scares are small and almost barely noticeable, and deeply effective if I do say so myself. And while I don't want to say too much about the ending, it definitely goes a lot further than I expected it to. This film is populated by very entertaining characters, including a medium, a skeptic, a psychologist who's been working with the possessed girl and published a book about their conversations. It's very Michelle Remembers. And there are even some people in the live studio audience who get nice character moments as well. There's also a studio band that offers that little extra bit of authenticity to the film. I really love the set design and color palette. There's lots of tans and browns and oranges, and the background of the set matches perfectly to the suit that David Dastmalchian is wearing, which I thought was a really nice touch. David Dastmalchian's performance is absolutely fantastic, and I really think he holds the film together. He's an actor who's been in many movies, and I'm sure you've seen him before. I've always quite liked him, but this is the first time I can ever recall him getting a leading role. I know some audiences have felt that we get a little bit too much of his backstory at the beginning of the film, but I personally didn't mind it, and I liked how it was woven into the climax. The possessed girl also gives a surprisingly excellent performance. I think the actress is probably a little bit older than she appears to be, and so the way she talks as the devil is really creepy. There's something really uncanny about a child behaving and talking like an adult, and it's really impressive that the young actress is able to pull it off without it feeling like she's just being directed in a certain way. So I have to commend her for the authenticity that I felt shown through in her performance. I also really liked the Clive Cussler looking motherfucker who played the skeptic. He does play the role that you would absolutely expect, just making snarky backhanded comments every time somebody says something earnest about the spirit world. But I thought he fit the role well, he was funny and entertaining, and when it's his turn to show how he debunks things, it's really riveting, to be honest. While I did overall really like this movie, I do have a couple of significant issues with it. I thought the final 10 minutes or so of the film got a little artsy for its own good. I don't think it's terribly poorly handled, but it's not really the climax that I wanted it to be, and it tries to do a more psychological type of horror in a way that I don't think is really earned by the preceding 90 minutes. Also interspersed throughout the film are some black and white segments that are purportedly the behind-the-scenes footage that we're seeing for the first time ever. But these scenes are shot like Veep, like with a handheld camera that's directly in the faces of the characters who are having these really private conversations. Conversations that would be inconceivable to have directly in front of a cameraman. But since all of what we're seeing is supposedly lost footage and none of it is meant to be taken as traditionally filmed, these scenes just really broke immersion for me. This is something I run into in a lot of films that are presented in an unorthodox way. To present a film as found footage or a documentary, or in this case a TV broadcast, you really do limit your options for what you can do, which means that you have to work harder and think longer about how certain things are going to be shown in a way that actually makes sense with the format that you chose to shoot the movie in. It's amazing how many films like this just give up and film certain scenes traditionally because there was no way around it in their minds. even though there definitely was. It doesn't seem to bother other people as much as it bothered me, but it is really a pet peeve of mine because I really like found footage films when they're done correctly and authentically feel like found footage. I also think it's worth talking about the controversy that led some reviewers to review bomb this film and give it half a star without even seeing it. Incidentally, a practice that I absolutely never condone. There's really no way to know that what people have told you about a film is correct unless you actually see it for yourself and make up your own mind. So if you haven't seen this movie and you have negative opinions about it already, it might be because you've heard that this film uses AI. How dare these filmmakers? Special effects artists are already underpaid as it is, and they had AI design things for it? How awful! I can't believe this! That's not what happened. Okay, yes, this film does use AI, but notice that I didn't tell you where or in what context yet, because that's how people are talking about it. This film uses AI, so automatically it is bad and must be given half a star, and no one should support it. So, what's the truth? How is AI used in this film? Well, since we're ostensibly watching a live broadcast, there are commercial breaks. Instead of commercials, we go to black and white segments, but in between them, there are some still images of dancing skeletons and the like, and the text will be right back. In these images, I believe there's only 3 of them, of dancing skeletons and pumpkin patches, are AI generated. I've also heard some people say that the TV show's logo is AI generated, but I cannot find any evidence to back that up, and so I'm not going to consider it. If you do have absolute proof that was AI generated, let me know, but I don't think it was. And let me be clear that I don't like that AI was used in this film, and I do think it's a fair thing to criticize it for. But come on. There are 3 still images that were actually edited, it's not just the AI generated image and that's it, that appear for a cumulative runtime of seconds. I honestly think it's pretty repugnant to call for a boycott of an indie film that had lots of creative people working on it because less than 1% of its runtime was obtained using morally dubious means. It was especially frustrating for me to see all this discourse about a creative independent horror film right after I'd sat through Imaginary, a film that doesn't feel like a single human had any involvement in it. Once again, I do think it's a fair thing to criticize, and it's something I'm happy to criticize the film for, but I'm not gonna let it completely cloud my judgment about the rest of the film that I watched. The hard truth is that AI is going to become more prevalent in our lives in every single aspect of existence. And trying to boycott Late Night with the Devil, a small film that uses AI in probably the least objectionable way I could possibly imagine it being used in filmmaking, simply isn't going to send the message you think it is to the large studios who are actually going to use it in far more abusive and morally reprehensible ways. All this to say, just be discerning. Don't be a sheep that thinks you have to hate a movie because someone that you admire told you that there's something morally reprehensible about it. If you don't want to see the movie, that's fine, but don't pretend that you have all the information you need to make a nuanced argument about it. So, I really liked Late Night with the Devil. It's not a perfect movie, but I really enjoyed it, and I think other horror fans would also really get a kick out of it. It's a very cozy, comfortable feeling horror film, and I could really see it being an annual Halloween watch for a lot of people. I did see it in theaters months ago at this point. I'm very slow at getting these reviews out, but it's now streaming on Shudder, so if you want to watch it and make up your own mind about all this crap, then I would recommend it. And I'm giving Late Night with the Devil a 7 out of 10. This was meant to be another rapid fire video where I talk about like 6 movies, but already at this point all the movies I've talked about so far have been out for a couple months already, so I'm going to wrap it up here, and next time you can look forward to reviews of Immaculate, The First Omen, I Saw the TV Glow, and In a Violent Nature. I'll see you then. Toodles.